Make every night a wonderful journey, no matter where you are. Here is your harbor of the soul. Good night, sweet dreams. The first story, Midwest, originally posted on X by Blackfeared or a Man. Having spent my life in a buzzing metropolis, driving through the Midwest states was a hypnotic and sobering experience. Anyone who has seen the breadbasket of America will know what I'm talking about. Fields, billions of acres of crops covering the land in waves of undulating leaves. The tame wilderness organized into rows, blocks, and circles, continuing on for hours and hours and hours and days. That's one of the strangest things about driving through the Midwest, the endless ocean of cornfields. Birth by man's labors seemed to go on without end, but with no signs of those who created it. Acre here, a small house there, a windmill, a rotting barn. It's as if some great civilization built it eons ago, and then died out, leaving the living remains of their creations for you to drive past and wonder at. That's how I found myself on the evening of the last day, in July, driving my red sedan along a veritable tunnel of a road cut across the cornfields. No broad highway for me. Rather, I had chosen a gravely detour which I had been promised led back to the interstate. The last few exhausting days had seen me driving non-stop across the country. But today, as the sun peaked in the sky and began its free fall back into the earth, the end of my trip drew near. Rest, relaxation, and who the fuck knows? Maybe even fun lay at my feet. The only thing separating me from my goal was a mile more of gravel road and a few insignificant minutes on the freeway. Unfortunately, my car was having a little trouble navigating the tiny country road. The assholes at the gas station had promised to warn but perfectly passable route, but a few miles in it became increasingly evident that neither description fit this sorry excuse for a road. Still, the anxiety didn't really sink until the gravel path degenerated into a dusty path, and then into mere ruts on the ground. As the weeds growing between the tire tracks began to hit the underside of my car, I briefly grappled with the idea of turning around and taking the more traditional, albeit longer, paved route, but soon that bitch, stubbornness, got her way, and I plowed on forwards against the rising weeds and the deepening dark. As the sun kissed its lower lip to the crust of the earth, I stopped the car. My journey had come to an abrupt halt. The road, barely discernible among the vegetation, and barely wide enough for the car, had ended stopped right in the middle of a field of corn apparently. This was the literal road to nowhere. I cursed the hicks back at the pump and save, who had given me these shit directions, and considered my options. Actually the only action now, was to return down the path I had so painfully traveled and take the long paved road all the way around. Holding my breath, I tried to stifle a headache, and several curse words running through my brain. That's when I heard that sweet sound. PRBP, RBP, 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 B, 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 B. The unmistakable mating cry of a Harley tearing down a highway at full speed. Evidently, the interstate was straight ahead and only a few hundred yards away. I felt some guilt for what I was planning, but stubborn sisters, adventure and lethargy, convinced me that mowing down several hundred feet of some farmer's corn harvest was worth not spending more hours on the road. I wasn't sure if I could hold up to such punishment, but my car handled it like a pro, crushing and pulverizing the green stalks as they bent away and under the bumper. A couple of minutes and bam, I was through, back out into the dim evening light. I laughed and flipped the wipers to clean, with the cream shrapnel covering my windshield. I stopped mid-laugh. This was a road, but definitely not the highway. A two-lane, paved, black road ran in a perfectly straight line off into the darkness, disappearing into the evening light. I cursed the assholes at the gas station again, and prepared to bash my way back to the dirt path. But, turning around, the beautiful whole light punched through. The field was gone. A wall of corn, not row to row, but stalk to stalk, stood in front of me, and I realized with a sinking heart that there was no way I could find the dirt path again in that solid block of green. Once again, I weighed my options just to now, left or right. I headed what I figured was due south and hoped this road linked up to the highway for which I so desperately strove. Miles and miles I traveled, no change in scenery, miles and miles of cornfields, pressing in on the car, enveloping me in the gloom of early night. No other cars, no other sounds, no radio reception. I stopped a few times, at first listening for the signs of a busy highway, and later just listening for anything at all. Anything beyond my own breathing. Nothing but the crickets, gently chirping to each other across the ocean of waving stalks. More driving. The crickets faded away, and only the occasional shrill whine of a cicada cried out into the night. More driving, low on gas. More driving. The moon peered over the tufts of corn and lifted itself into the sky, transforming the land into monochrome, draining away color. More driving, very fucking low on gas. More driving. Nothing but corn. Corn fucking everywhere. More driving. A barn. The glow from the light of the moon made it appear like a ship in the sea, a dark but welcome shape rising above the monotonous and oppressive landscape with a mixture of relief and apprehension. I continued down the road. One turn, a short dot away, and I'm there, parking at the bottom of the slopey hill that leads up to its moonlit roof. It's built in an old wooden style, gabled with heavy oak doors. It looks old, like, not just the normal. Oh, look. It's an old barn, kids. Old. But really old, like it hadn't been looked upon, much less opened, in hundreds of years still. Its presence offered some hope and companionship, shelter and safety. Getting out of the car, I walked up the path to the front doors. Interestingly, the grass all around the barn, a meadow extending about 50 yards, was clearly meticulously cottoned, groomed also. The path up to the barn had been worn smooth, like some large machine had routinely pounded up and down, polishing and flattening the path. Striding up to the door, I knocked and knocked again. I gave it several minutes, but apparently no one was living inside. I opened the doors and walked in. I was right. The stench hit me first. It was powerful, like a left hook right on the nose, seedy and cloying and sour. It was like being dunked headfirst into a porta potty. I retched, struggling to force fresh air down into my lungs, but as my eyes adjust and the stench escapes into the cool night breeze, the horror begins. The barn was full of corpses. Dead bodies lay on tables, hung from the walls, and sat piled in great heaps into the corners, green with rot. Their open mouths were grinning, their decayed eyes staring empty ly about the barn. The world started to spin around. My knees buckled and my breath escaped once again. Hundreds of bodies, some were still fresh, crumpled, spread eagle in the corners of the barn, huge red-ringed gashes covering their bodies, wounds that looked like splashes of lipstick applied to their pale, naked forms. Older, rotten corpses were laying out flat onto stone and wooden tables and hung from the walls, cut open and divided in a grotesquely methodical pattern, their hearts were placed carefully near their heads, tongues cut out, various organs lying discarded and piled onto the floor below, and their intestines bunched up and knotted like a nightmarish bouquet of flowers. Further into the barn lay the bits and pieces, brown dried hunks of what used to be heads, arms, and torsos and crates giant. Wooden boxes piled neatly along the back wall of the barn, almost innocuous but horrible. Dark stains seeped from under the lid and ran down, but nothing compares to what hung from the ceiling. A fraying rope stretched down from the rafters, hanging from the rope, gently swinging, in the night over the bloody tables, was bound a horrible absurdity of something that was once alive. It resembled a victim of some terrible holocaust, its skin shriveled tight against its chest and belly, the arms unnaturally long and thin, haughtied behind its back. Its hands and feet were enormous, ending in gnarled fingers a foot long, with a jagged yellow nail at the tip of each one. His head, a burlap sack, and tied around its neck, completely covering the corpse's features. A gash ran the length of its neck, the dried remains of some purple ichor running down from the wound and staining the back over its head, swinging there. Dead in the moonlight, I rose above the waves of fear and stumbled out of the barn, slamming the door shut behind me outside. The moon still rose, the wind still blows, and the crickets chirped the whole Leave and drive, those were the only thoughts that permeated my numbed mind. I turned away from the wooden monstrosity before me and ran to my car, but the car wasn't there. There was nothing around but cornfields as I ran around the barn. The rows of waving stalks danced before my eyes, trapped in an ocean on a ship of the dead. No, I cannot stay here. I made a break for the fields of corn, the terrors behind chasing me heedlessly into the unknown ahead. As I hit the edge of the cornstalks, my courage failed me. I couldn't go ahead, and I couldn't go back. I stood there, shrouded by the complete silence. A light breeze tousled my hair as I stood motionless and frozen. Gently, the field of corn swayed in place as the wind picked up then. The wind really began to pick up. The corn stalks began to march back and forth in what was quickly becoming a maelstrom. The wind whipped my face or across my arms. It reached down my throat, pulling my scream out and mixing it with the surrounding chaos. Rain. It was suddenly raining, a torrent, a solid sheet of water falling from the heavens, knocking me off my feet, churning the solid ground into liquid lightning. Thunder. Arcs of electricity flew before my face, striking and touching the ground at my feet. I ran back to the only shelter there is, all my fear forgotten, in this struggle to survive this onslaught from above. I barricaded myself in the barn. I was shrouded in perfect darkness except for the pulses of lightning that glint off the outlines of the dead. That was past fear. I was petrified, crouching against the bolted oak doors, the rain hammering a machine gun fire behind me, trying to bash its way, and behind me lay certain death, and in front of me lay the dead. The pulsing lightning seemed to animate them. They danced and shivered, and grinned and laughed. They had nothing to fear. They laughed at me and my fear. They laughed at my blood. They laughed at my heartbeat. To this cacophony of laughter I sat frozen, watching over those that could not move. Lightning bolted across the sky. Flash. Dark. Flash. The wind blew the corpse tied to the ceiling. It rocked back and forth in long arcs above my head. Dark. His hands swung back and forth beneath it. Dark. I thought the hands were tied behind the back. Flash. The rope is swung back and forth. The monstrosity was gone. The dark. Flash. Suddenly, I saw it crouching on the floor. Its bagged head hung low beneath its shoulders. The cadaver's limbs flailed about, sliding it across the bloody wooden planks towards me. In the flashes of light I saw its sickening, twitching movement as it swayed back and forth, its head bobbing around with no control. I heard it, bubbling, murmuring, babbling. It sounded like a drowning man tried to talk it. Alden gurgled and sputtered and screamed. Unintelligible, no pattern, no sense. It twitched, screaming, across the floor as I lay frozen against the wall, watching its movement in the throbbing light. Flash. Dark. I heard its blithering in my ear. Dark. I felt its ragged breathing. Dark. Burlap brushed by my face. Flash. I ran. Out the door. And across the churning mud. The rain threw me down. Into the muck again and again. With a guttural snarl. It was after me. On all fours. It leapt and twitched. And gurgled and screamed as it chased me into the corn. Knocking aside the stalks, I staggered into the pitch blackness. I ran and seen things toward me. Was it the leaves, or had the beast caught up? I ran and ran. I ran and tripped. I tripped. I tripped on a root, or did it grab me by the ankles? I ran and ran, oblivious to the darkness, to my fear, to my aching lungs, and then it caught me. Long nails, no, talons, gown, soles in garnish and yellow, drew into my shoulder and held me back. I stumbled and fell. I was going to die. I could feel its breath on my face again. I could taste the death on its hidden lips. I will not die. With a yell I rose up and grabbed its sallow arm, tearing its claws out of my back with a sharp flash of pain and blood. The monstrosity gibbered and yelped, and I ran, and I tripped again, falling down into darkness, skidding across mud and stones, almost drowning in the muck. I tumbled down and down, then it all came to a stop. I looked up from the bottom of a dish and realized I'm out of the cornfield. I was at the road. The rain had gone away, the wind had died. Best of all, my car was parked by the edge of the road. I wasted no time in jumping in, locking the door, and starting the engine miraculously. I had half a tank of gas. With a yell, I stepped on the gas pedal, hoping to charge forward forever and ever out of the blackness and into the light of day. The mud churned beneath me. My tires spun helplessly, then sunk into the muck ahead of me. The cornstalks parted, and the dead thing rolled out into the beam of my headlights. With growls and burbles, it slowly slipped through the mire in front of me, taking its time, savoring the web of dread it had trapped me in. Last chance, I stepped the gas again and flew forward. The creature leapt my windshield, cracked with a thunk and a splash of purple blood. It collided against the car, then flew across the road. "FUCKYOU," I cried as I steered towards its crumpled form. 10 feet, 5 feet, 3 feet, it got up. I missed, but as I went swerving by, it didn't give chase. I could see it in the rearview mirror, struggling to stand up. I shifted into reverse and revved the engine. Then a shape appeared above the cornstalk, blotting out the moon. A shadow climbed out of the field and walked down to the road. The light of night shone off shoulders that stretched meters across. 40 feet above the ground, the outline of a head eclipsed the stars. It bent down to the monstrosity. Sitting in a pool of vile blood, the shadow picked it up, caressed it, then it turned toward me. A low moan filled the air, rattling the car and sending the cornstalks into another mad dance. With its free hand, the monstrous shadow reached down to its waist and lifted something high into the air, something big and sharp that reflected the light of the moon across the darkened fields. I slammed back into gear and flew forward. The moan continued, the steering wheel coming loose in my hands. The cornfield are in a mad frenzy, stalks bending and swaying with so much force they uproot toss into the air, covering the road in shadows, and leaves thud, 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 thud. Ground-shaking footsteps coming for me, coming closer. A shriek of metal and something cleaved the roof of my car in two. Light spilled into the car like air into a wound. The sound of twisting metal deafened me as the wheels began to lift off the ground, and then it was over. I dropped back to the road and accelerated, the shadow's footsteps fading away into its hellish moan. I tore down the road without abandon, the dark shape and its unearthly call fading behind me. I get it now. The horrible, blubbering shape was merely a pet, a dog, a guardian of whatever nightmarish creature lives and works in the barn. It was the true master of that slaughterhouse. Although it was far behind that dark shadow, it looked enormous. It turned, a flash of silver bursting from its hand, as it disappeared back into the swaying cornfields, pedal to the metal. 130 mph, the engine roaring, the tires squealing. I flew down the road, impervious to my surroundings, to the blood flowing down my back. Minutes passed like lifetimes. Trees and shadows loomed like 1,000 unnamed horror down upon my head. Then a light, more lights. A town, not just a town. Town. The fucking place I was trying to reach so long ago, earlier today, in an earlier life. I stumbled into a diner, the screaming of the waitress lulling me into dark unconsciousness. Sleepwalking. The doctors say here, take these pills, they say. 100 doctors, maybe more, and they all agree that I'm a head case. The cuts on my face and arms, scratches from the sharp corn leaves, my shattered windshield. I drove into a ditch. They throw a rainbow of pills in my face to cut down on my dreams, to avoid panic attacks, to bury my sorrows in a field of manufactured happiness. I guess doctors know best. Still, there are some things they've never been able to explain. I had some tests done on the purple liquid spattering my car. Inconclusive. All of them. Apparently it's blood. But contains that are not blood. There isn't much to say. Clean cut the shrunts that runs the length of my roof either. Nobody has been able to tell me what can cleave steel like butter. Then I stay in the city. Now the chalky smell of concrete, the sharp smell of steel, even the bitter aroma of living humans keeps me sane. My apartment has no plants in it. I eat meat and bread. The sight of a cob of corn, or even a kernel, makes me throw up. Sometimes faint for the most part. I can interact normally except for the vomiting thing, and pretend like that last day in July never happened. I feel perfectly safe in the daytime, but each night when I sleep, I'm forced back to the moonlit fields, where the cornstalks bend and sway with the howling wind, back to the hall of corpses, where the hooded monstrosity shrieks and deberescent twitches, back to the haunting ground of the unseen butcher, whose long knives flash into the darkness. The second story, blueberries. He smashed the dark oak desks into shards of stray wood strewn about the chamber with his sledgehammer. He couldn't eat the whole thing in one bite. As the veins in his eyes pulsed, and his teeth ground for individual superiority over the others, he tried to think of something that didn't involve what the guard outside the heavy door was going to watch him eat through the bulletproof glass. Blueberries, they're nice. I remember blueberries, the best ones, came from the big bushes outside the McCoy house in Michigan. I'm going to eat a desk for a crime. I didn't commit blueberries. He laid his hammer down, sat on the floor, and stared for a few minutes at the wall. He eventually picked up an ant-sized chip of wood. He held his nose and opened his mouth wide. This is a blueberry, this is a McCoy blueberry. They'd always be happy to give me their blueberries. And this is one of them. As he swallowed it all, he gagged as he felt the edges of the chip cut the lining of his throat. He forced it into his stomach. The back of his mouth became sour with little drops of blood. That was a blueberry, a very sweet blueberry, picked at just the right time. I probably liked it. He choked down more chips. More blood came up, and nausea set in from the wood and its varnish. He couldn't throw up. Then he would have to start over. He got to his feet and raised the sledgehammer high above his head to make more of these pieces out of the bigger ones. I love blueberries. I'm going to eat a lot of blueberries. The door flung open, and before he could say anything, the guard took his hammer and slammed the door. Well, it looks like I'm going to be eating big blueberries. He sat on the floor and grabbed a foot-long length of splintered oak. He tried to break it, but it would only break in half. He pointed his face at the fluorescent light on the ceiling and opened his mouth wide. This is a blueberry. I know it looks nothing like a blueberry, but it is. I'm a sword swallower. I can eat a sword made out of blueberries. He nudged the wood past the opening of his throat. He felt it scrape. He felt it slide. Gently, gently. This is a blueberry. It doesn't taste like one, but it probably is. He felt his mouth water, and in doing so he gagged. He couldn't breathe. He tried to pull the wood out of his throat, but the edges were caught on the inside of him. With a long scream saturated by his torn throat, he ripped the stick out and threw it to the other side of the chamber. His mouth was a fountain of saliva and blood. His esophagus might as well have been on fire with the pain. He turned his head and saw a sturdy board that made the surface of the desk. He only split it in half with the hammer. That is no blueberry. The third story. My perfect world shattered. It's only a few weeks since I left the mainland. Good riddance it. It's been years since I got my doctorate. I was trying to follow in my grandfather's footsteps, becoming a scientist to try and better the world on the mainland. However, I'd unfortunately experienced nothing but setbacks and concern to my peers and my government. Using the knowledge I'd gained through years of studying engineering and robotics, I built my own craft and secreted. It has taken a while, but I finally completed it. I set out today from the main continent toward one of the larger, uninhabited islands far from my home nation. I've had my fill of my corrupt and just government and what they call progress. After all, this is the same government that allowed my favorite cousin to die years prior. When she fell ill to a terminal disease, this was same government who jailed my grandfather, then in their employ, for attempting to find a cure for her fatal ailment. I had always sought to use my gifts to better humanity, yet I knew, as I grew older, that the culture of the mainland would not allow me to. It was because of this that I set out, far away, to an unclaimed chunk of land. In an attempt to pioneer my own nation, I hope to create all, and where corruption and sadness are non-existent. I know this is not completely possible, but I must try. By morning I will arrive at the new land. I must rest now. I set forth to explore the island. There are no people here, but there is a great myriad of wildlife. The animals seem to be dwarf variations of those I'd found on the mainland. Most of them, even those that are considered feral and territorial, such as bears and walruses, have proven friendly and sociable towards me. I must take care to protect them and preserve a safe environment for them as I build my new country. Things of such a good nature should be protected after all. During my survey of the island, I came across the ruins of an old, extinct culture apparently. It had inhabited the island before, yet there was no trace of its people at the core of the structure. I found a group of relics atop pedestals, afraid to disturb them. I ran a test to determine their composition, in hopes that it may be given me some clues to the culture that was here before. The relic seemed to be emitting a large amount of energy. A machine would easily be able to harness it as a power source. Fearful that, should I been followed by my government, they would fall into the wrong hands, I removed the 6 of them from the ruins. In doing so, I accidentally reactivated the structure's archaic security system, a series of traps that rely on a lava flow running underneath the ground for both its power source and firepower. The natives obviously realized the power of these relics, as they wanted them protected as well. I'll have to disable it later, after I've put things in order now. In order to build my country, I must keep these animals safe, as well as the relics. This is becoming more troublesome than I initially imagined, but I feel I will persevere. Every problem has a solution. After all, tomorrow I will begin construction. I began construction today, in order to keep the animals out of harm's way. I've developed numerous suspended animation systems. The initial model was a capsule structure designed to house numerous animals at once, though the number was still limited after all. I didn't want them slumbering in a cramped space where they could be unintentionally injured while they were unconscious. After filling up the few models I had, I discovered there was a slight overflow of the population. Not wanting them to be injured by the robots I'd built to help with construction, I had to engineer some way to house this overflow. I created portable suspended animation capsules and added them to the internal workings of my worker boards. This'll house the overflow and keep them safe. The animals will be completely unconscious the entire time, so when matters are put in order, they'll wake up as if they've just been asleep for the night. This is one issue out of the way. As for the relics, I've placed them in secure locations throughout the island. Each of them is hidden in a virtual reality simulation stations that I've engineered as a barrier. The unearthly physics and constantly changing gravity in the program would make it impossible to retrieve the relics inside. Since I'm the only one with access to disable the program, I'm the only one who can get to them. They'll be safe for now. Now I can move onward with building my nation. I've established my base of operations at the center of the island. It's a bit bare bones at the moment, but setting up the rest of the island first is more important. The robots have made construction go along so much faster. I've already set up a city and a highway. At least I have my nation's capital completed. I came across a series of buried ruins and an underground lake while building both. I built over it, while taking care to not completely destroy the structure. I sent several of my robots down into the ruins to investigate. Hopefully, they'll return with valuable data about the island's original people. I made the decision to preserve the island's coast, as it was too difficult for me to sully such natural beauty. I sent a few of my robots there to monitor the area and to keep watch for signs of any visitors. I don't want any tourists or government officials interfering with my plans after all. I keep forgetting to disable the traps in the above-ground ruins I encountered on my first day here. The days keep growing shorter, I suppose. I'll have to take care of it later. The robot site stationed on the coast had alerted me to a disturbance in the early hours of the morning. The images sent back by them appeared to be of some sort of beast. It wasn't like any creature I'd ever encountered. I'm certain the zoologists on the mainland would have declared it a new species despite the intrigue the creature inspired. The reports indicated that it was attacking, and worse, destroying my robots. Internal suspension capsules would likely die of shock from the suspended animation process being halted unexpectedly. I had to do something. I set out from the base in my craft, armed, but not looking for a fight. I optimistically assumed that perhaps this animal was one I'd missed in my sweep of the island, and was reacting this way out of fright. I hoped I could calm the creature upon my arrival, and put him into a sleep enclosure, like the other animals. How wrong I was when I arrived at the coast. I spotted the creature from the air, attacking the en masse suspended animation capsule I'd made for the coastal area. I descended in my craft and called out to the creature in an attempt to reason with and overcome it. On first sight, the creature turned and lunged for my vehicle. I dodged out of the way and activated the weapons I'd installed, hoping to subdue it. Such an attempt proved too quick to land a single hit upon, and before I knew it, it had ripped the weapons off of my craft. I had no choice but to retreat. I flew away in my craft, fearful for what chaos this monster may bring to my new home. As I departed, I turned back to see the beast destroying the capsule the animal I'd safely tugged away convulsed out of the wreckage. Flopping about the ground below, my heart sank at the sight. I have to do something to stop this monster. The airborne drones I released have tracked the creature's route. It was crossing through the above-ground ruins upon the last report. From what I can tell, the monster is heading for the city I just recently finished building. My new country's capital is standing for 3 days, and already it's under threat of attack. What's more, it seems it found and disabled the VR security device at the coast and retrieved the relic inside. In addition to being ferocious, it seems the creature is intelligent as well. Foolishly, I placed a capsule on the outskirts of the ruins, thinking it was safe. I felt I must go and retrieve it before the creature can destroy and harm the animals inside. I equipped my craft with a flame harrower, hoping this destructive beast couldn't survive flames. When I arrived, once again, it proved too fast to actually land. It sliced the flamar, were clean off of my craft, like a knife through butter. I had to flee again. I'll have to block its progress at the city itself. I'm afraid let's just hope my plan works. The additional security I added to the city failed to keep the creature out. Most every robot I stationed there has been destroyed. My attempt to personally assault the creature failed again. I fled, in hopes to find another place to head it off, and later received reports that it had dived into the underground ruins and destroyed every robot I put down there. I attempted to dam up a portion of the underground lake to flood the ruins and drown the monster. I optimistically thought I could quell it this way, but the attempt failed. I suspect the creature may have increased lung capacity, as it later escaped the ruins after they'd been completely flooded. It seems bent on destroying every piece of technology I've placed on this island. Less than an hour later, it was attacking the robot side left, monitoring the highway. I attempted to head it off yet again, but I failed. Nothing I do, no weapon I try will stop this beast. I retreated to my base. My robots outside the base have all been destroyed. The beast has also managed to find and disable each of the VR systems. Now it has all of the relics in its closet. It's planning something. All I know is that it wants me gone. I haven't slept. The creature breached the front gates of the base at the brink of dawn. Every robot and machine in its path has been brutally destroyed. I got desperate and opened up a trapdoor into a set of ruins I'd built the base on. I managed to plunge the demon down into it and seal it off, while hiding myself behind a force field. I thought I was safe at that point, as there seemed to be no sign of it returning. To cool my head, I retreated into my lab to try and work on a large-scale hydraulic press I'd been working on to help me better manufacture my robots. It was then that the creature emerged from the floor and attacked the machine. Apparently, there was no killing it. It totaled the machine before I could blink. I fled the lab and made my way down the corridor to the launch hatch for the craft I'd flown to the island. I could see the beast in hot pursuit. I managed to jump into the craft and lift off in time, flying off from the cliff overlooking the island below. I thought I was in the clear, but then it felt as if something had struck the back of the craft. The machinery sparked and burst into flames. I turned my head to look back at the launch hatch, and I saw the beast standing there, grinning in a grotesque satisfaction that it ensured my demise. As I plummeted into the rocks below in a cloak of flames, I assured myself that I would survive. I would bring this world a utopia, even if it killed me. It was then, for the first time in my life, that I felt contempt for another living thing. This beast, for no reason, has destroyed all my hard work and risked the lives of those innocent creatures. It had more than earned my hatred, as sure as my name is Drivo Robotnik. I hate that hedgehog.